Hello and welcome to episode 32 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. Like most people, we enjoy watching horror movies as Halloween nears. This year, we remember Wes Craven by watching A Nightmare on Elm Street, his 1984 slasher hit. This is not my first time watching it, but Ryan has never seen it.
A Nightmare on Elm Street was a standout success in the slew of slasher films that came out in the 80s. It spawned several sequels, and Freddy Krueger is one of the most recognizable movie villains of all time. Made for just under $2 million, it grossed over $26 million, saved New Line Cinema, which in a way means we have A Nightmare on Elm Street to thank for Lord of the Rings ever getting made. Also, it established Wes Craven as a major figure in horror movies. It also launched the career of Johnny Depp, for what that's worth.
It's worth a lot to me.
Well, sure. A few movies. Yeah.
But does Freddy still conjure nightmares and thrills?
Or has its impact waned, putting us to sleep rather than keeping us awake late into the night? Keep listening. And whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
And we're going to need some more coffee and caffeine pills.
Oh, yeah. Stay awake.
All day long I've been seeing that guy's weird face and hearing those fingernails.
Fingernails? That's amazing you saying that. That made me remember the dream I had last night.
What'd you dream?
I dreamed about a guy in a dirty red and green sweater.
Well, what about the fingernails?
Oh, he scraped his fingernails along things. Actually, they were more like finger knives or something he'd made himself. But they made a horrible sound. It's like, scream.
Nancy, you dreamed about the same creep I did.
All right, so that was Tina and Nancy discussing their dreams from last night, finding out they had a little bit in common.
Yeah. How often does that happen?
Not often.
No.
My dreams are usually so boring, it's probably for the better that people don't have mutual dreams with my dream. But
Yeah, like that dream where I think you were just reading the paper.
yeah, I mean, there's
You
usually
talked about that a lot.
reading the paper or often filing some papers,
Sure.
often old tax returns.
With no hitches, no problems.
No,
Things are just, you've got a stack.
no, but
and
you know,
file them.
as Halloween nears,
Yeah.
maybe I'll have a dream of filing papers and one of them has some slashes in it.
Oh, okay. So you've got seasonal dreams.
See, yeah.
Are you filing Christmas cards?
Yeah. That'll be soon.
Perhaps end of year giving papers?
Charitable donations.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. Then yes, that's exactly what my
That's your
December
Christmas
dreams tend to be.
dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I'm glad nobody has to endure those dreams.
Yeah, it would
along
be a
with you.
nightmare in its own right.
It would
But
be, yeah.
we're not talking about my
No.
dreams tonight.
Thankfully, the dreams in A Nightmare on Elm Street are much more interesting than your paperwork dreams. But that is a moment early in the movie where Tina and Nancy are realizing they were dreaming about the same person who turns out to be Fred Krueger.
Mm-hmm. Funny how they don't really call him Freddy Krueger.
He calls himself that.
Yeah, he does.
Which I
That's
never
right.
like when people come up with their own nicknames.
Oh.
Yet another reason to dislike Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, it's another reason that he's just kind of grating and annoying.
Hey, it's Fred Krueger. Freddy. Oh, well, okay.
okay. Guess that's what we're calling you.
Freddy.
It's October. As we talked about earlier on in our intro, we do like to use this month to fill in a few gaps in our viewing of horror movies.
Yeah, horror is not typically a genre I'm drawn to.
Yeah, me neither. But
so
I do
it's-
like it.
I do too. When I find a good one,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm curious before we jump into this, because you also like to fill in those blind spots. What are a few blind spots you've been filling in this month, other than the obvious one we're going to be discussing?
Yeah, I have not yet started, but
There's
I've got a
still
lot.
time.
I didn't watch any horror movies growing up. Like, definitely no in my house.
Okay.
So
You would have watched them if it was okay, do you think, or did you just
I
never
probably
even have
would
an
have been
interest?
scared. I wasn't. I was not interested.
Yeah.
But this year, I'm not sure. I always like going back and seeing some of the older ones. I saw It Follows this year.
Yeah.
I saw the Babadook.
Okay. I saw It Follows. I did not see the Babadook.
I really love the Babadook. I thought It Follows was okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't like horror as a genre in and of itself. Like, I won't just sit down in any horror movie. Well, even if it's not great, I'll still love it. I like to sort of wait a little bit and see, how they are reviewed. Are people that I respect saying good things about it?
Yeah,
or is it just a foundational movie like A Nightmare on Elm Street or Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Sure.
I've always got some that I want to see.
Yeah.
Even though Nightmare on Elm Street sort of is maybe the kickoff to my horror movie watching.
Yeah. You're what will now be a marathon from now
Right.
until Halloween.
Yeah. Oof. It's going to be busy. I'm calling in sick.
Good.
Yeah, every day. It's at that point. I've got enough sick days to call in sick until Halloween. So
Good to use them. Use those sick days. They're there for a reason.
yeah, you use them or you lose them.
That's how
say.
they work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What have you watched?
I got kind of a late start as well, but I watched the Tim Burton Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp because
That's not a bad movie.
I thought it was pretty
Did you?
terrible. I think what
I've
made
never
me
wanted to see it again.
Right. What made me want to watch it was I remember thinking it looked really cool.
Back in 1999?
Yeah, I mean it was still in the 90s, but I think it was pretty late. Yeah, 99 sounds about right. It's on Netflix, and it's Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci, and and Christopher Walken for some reason.
Oh yeah.
I just kind of was like, I really miss classic Tim Burton.
Yeah.
That looks like Tim Burton.
That one's not classic Tim Burton.
Well, it's not, but it's got the
classic
look.
era.
It just has that 90s era of Tim Burton feel, and not good.
No.
Not good. So I was a little
Johnny
disappointed
Depp's
by
not
that.
bad in it.
Yeah, he's fine. But the story just goes really off the rails by the end. A lot of those movies that try to take like a shorter story and they try to blow it into a full feature film, and it's obvious
like
they really
with
didn't
Alice
know
in
how.
Wonderland. Like, yeah.
The other movie I watched, which we talked a little bit off mic, was I watched The Conjuring last night. So I'm going on very little sleep right now.
That is without a doubt the scariest.
Can we just say, as a podcast, that Can We Still Be Friends? This is sort of our stamp that this is the scariest movie we have ever seen.
Yes.
is The Conjuring.
And I know I've heard people say that it wasn't. Like,
Yeah, me too. But
a student last year said she watched it, and I was like, oh man, whew, how are you doing? And she was like, I thought it was really funny. And I'm like, you are hiding. You are hiding your fear. Like, there's no way.
There are different
you
things
thought
that scare different people, and I think that's just for
that
me.
might
That's
be
what
it.
does it. It's that
No, The Conjuring is by far the horror
demonic
movie that
stuff,
scared me the most.
the paranormal stuff is
based on a true
definitely-
story
Based on a true
stuff.
story, yeah. It's true. I haven't seen a ton of horror movies, but I've seen enough to know that they don't usually faze me all that much. They faze me maybe as I'm watching them. I might be on the edge of my seat
Right.
during it, but
Yeah.
afterwards I'm able to kind of
It's-
put it aside and get some shut eye. But this one was just
Yeah.
it lingered.
No.
and it's also the movie itself, as we were talking. It's just relentless.
Yeah, halfway through, I paused the movie, and I genuinely thought, I don't know if I can finish
Yeah.
this. But I know that's a terrible idea. Horror movies resolve, usually, in some way. And so I was like, if I stop now, I will only be even more frightened than if I finish it. But The Conjuring, yes, definitely stamp of approval.
I feel
but
like
be careful.
Yeah. So I feel like these last 2 years, it's been kind of nice because last year I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was another one
Genuinely
that genuinely
unsettling,
scared
yeah.
me. So I'm like, wow, I'm actually picking out some movies this year and last year where I'm legitimately getting a little scared, which feels good. And when you're
It does a little bit.
a little bit, yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't watch them if we didn't think they might actually scare us a little bit. I was just curious about that before we jump into Nightmare on Elm Street. So why don't we go ahead and get into our discussion?
Since I have not seen this movie, I can't talk about the first time I saw it.
Sure.
This isn't a rewatch for
Yeah.
me, but you have. So what's your history with this movie? Did you watch it when you were a kid?
No.
Okay.
I've actually, the first time I watched it was probably about 3 years ago.
Oh, really?
It really
Okay.
wasn't that. This was another one of those movies I did as a sort of blind spot gap
Yeah.
filler a couple years ago.
Did you watch a lot of horror movies when you were a kid?
No, we grew up in that sort of video rental
Yeah.
age, and the horror movies were always kind of off in their own section, and
Yeah.
they just kind of scared me.
Me too.
The look of the
Yeah.
boxes.
Oh, I hated
know?
it. I hated it.
Yeah. And I liked scary stuff. I liked going to haunted houses, but the movies we never watched a ton of as a family or by myself or even with my friends. I had seen a few. I saw Halloween and Friday the 13th in high school. Exorcist I saw in high school. That's kind of where it ended, I think.
Yeah. I didn't watch any of that stuff even then. Our video rental place actually had like a fake stone gate over
Really?
Yeah.
This place sounds pretty great.
Videoland in Grafton, Wisconsin.
Well, I guess the reason I bring that up, though, is what would happen is because you did see those boxes, but maybe you didn't see the movies, is you were familiar with all the characters.
Yeah.
So I knew Freddy Krueger. I knew Jason. I knew was it Pinhead that's from the Hellraiser movies. Leatherface. All of these.
The idea of Candyman, at least. Lawnmower Man also sticks out to me.
Yes, that's another one. And so, I never knew if these movies were any good, but the boxes sure did scare me enough. Absolutely. And so I certainly had an idea of Freddy Krueger, but I'd never actually seen Nightmare on Elm Street. I actually realized that my whole understanding of the plot of Nightmare on Elm Street before seeing it was from a Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, the one where Groundskeeper Willie is sort of like the Freddy Krueger character. And I remember it's like a PTA conference and they like throw him into a furnace. And he comes out with his Scottish accent.
That's right.
And they also have to try to stay awake because he keeps trying to kill them in their dreams. And in that little Simpsons segment, I never really put it together that was Nightmare on Elm Street.
That was the plot, actually.
Right. Yeah. That actually was that this is because to me, Freddy Krueger was just a murderer. I didn't know the whole dream thing.
I didn't either. It wasn't that long ago that I knew, he kills them in their dreams.
Like that's the plot.
I actually think it was when the 2010 remake came out and the commercials were all about like don't fall asleep and like all that stuff.
And I always thought that meant just like don't fall asleep because a killer will come into your room.
When you're asleep, right? Possibly interesting story. They filmed a lot of the remake in Lake Forest where I live.
Oh, really?
And the set was between my house and work and my job. So every day for a couple of months, I drove past the set for that movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Lots of fog.
It was like 7 a.m, so they weren't doing a lot of, quiet, please, sir. Can you get your Saturn out of the shot?
So, I eventually watched it and was underwhelmed. It had its charm to it. I guess I just kind of categorize it as being of its time. It certainly didn't keep me up at night. It didn't really even pull any real thrills for me the first time watching it. And so I didn't really think to watch it again until we were kind of trying to think of an episode. And, Wes Craven recently passing away and reading some people pulling out what was good about Nightmare on Elm Street kind of made me excited to watch it again.
Okay. So do you have a rating for did you rate it on Letterboxd before?
I didn't look. I think I gave it 3 stars though.
And on the review?
Oh, you want me just to tell you right now?
Just go for it. I got nothing else to say.
Oh, okay. All right. So for me, after watching it again, I think I'm just going to keep it at 3 stars.
Okay. I'll say 3 stars too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't really, it didn't change for me.
Okay.
But why don't you go ahead and talk about this being your first time? What were some of your first reactions watching it?
Well, it depends on when in the movie you're asking for my reaction. Because I feel like early on, I'm definitely with it. I'm with it for a lot of it.
Okay.
Not enthralled, not terrified, not
keeping your interest.
Impressed, yeah. I'm interested in what's happening. I have some questions. There's some things I'm like, well, okay. And then in the last 15 minutes, I'm like, I don't know what this is doing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ending, I was like, okay, I really have no idea what this movie is doing. I thought I had it pinned down for a while. I thought, this is kind of just a morality story. The good kids are kind of protected. Like, obviously, the trope of the promiscuous teenagers, Tina and Rod, dying first.
After being obnoxiously loud during sexual intercourse.
Right.
But that's part
Johnny
of the course.
Depp, right. Johnny Depp even says, while he's listening to them, morality sucks. So he feels like, oh, look at me. My morality is causing me to be punished because I'm not allowed to have sex. But really, we see, no, your morality has kept you alive up to this point. Sort of. I mean, there's no real... That's our judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the bad kids are the ones that get killed first. So I kind of was wondering, like, oh, is that just all he is doing? But then he's not at all.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Yeah.
So the movie opens with Tina's dream, but they both had the same...
Right. I know.
I mean, they both had that
But just,
same experience
yeah.
of seeing Fred Krueger in their dream.
Yeah, and I may have been reading into it too much, but just like the fact that they were the two who died, and
Yeah.
it looked like Glenn and Nancy were going to survive.
Yeah.
And it's an effective monster movie. You know, like Freddy Krueger is he's unsettling at times.
At times.
When he cuts himself open and it's green and the maggots come out.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah. And when he's, the opening credits of him making the knives and
I think my favorite is seeing him in like I guess it's like a sort of an alleyway or a back street, and his arms are just long.
like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it looks just off.
Right.
I mean, part of that might be some schlocky special effects, but I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just that it's supposed to just kind of be a little unsettling.
Yeah, and it definitely was. So there are things like that I was like, yeah, I mean, he's doing his thing and it's good. There were other things I was like, yeah, this is 1984. This is pretty...
Right.
So I was kind of in and out with it. I was up and down, and then I kind of ended down.
I think I'm kind of with you. And here's the thing is I hate this phrase, but I'm going to use it anyways because it keeps coming up in my mind when I try to put to words what I think about Nightmare on Elm Street. And it comes down to Nightmare on Elm Street. It is what it is.
Yeah.
That's the most I can ever really say
Sure.
about it. Like it, and I mean that in a couple different ways. I mean it as it's iconic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is your introduction to Freddy Krueger, who obviously is a horror icon. And it is what it is in the sense that it's a teen horror movie.
Right.
So, yeah, of course, it's a little campy. The dialogue is pretty stale. The script is not all that great.
Nancy's
The
not a good
acting's pretty
actress.
bad. It is what it is. You know, it's just what you get. You know what you're getting when you go into it, I think.
Yeah.
The music is very 80s, which I kind of like, actually.
Some
but
of it I
is.
really liked. Some of it was very distracting.
The score by Charles Bernstein. And the song at the credits,
Oh my
Nightmare,
gosh.
is so bad. It's so funny.
Horrible. I couldn't believe it. I was like, they're really doing this.
Like, sort of hair metal, kind of.
A little bit, but like hair metal pop. Already in 84, they were doing like hair metal light.
I never was a guy to sleep with lights, but then I never had these kind of nights. Something evil watching over me, and I'm afraid to say no fantasy. It's a nightmare. It's just a dream. No, it's a nightmare. It's just a dream. It's a nightmare.
What year did Ghostbusters come out? I think it was 84 too, but was this just the year where every movie had its own song and it all sounded like it was made in 1984?
Yeah, because Beverly Hills Cop, right?
That's just a thing, I guess, of that year. So,
Yeah.
and I think what does set Nightmare on Elm Street apart and makes it just a cut above your average is that it is just such an awesome concept.
Mm-hmm.
You think of horror movies already as being a genre that's supposed to make it hard for you to sleep.
Right.
And this is a movie that is really feeding on that fear of like that thing that you think is going to give you relief is actually the last thing you should do because that's where the killing actually happens is in your dreams.
And you're totally out of
And
control.
from a filmmaking standpoint, what an awesome idea because you can play with surrealism
Yes.
and play with reality and bend, you know, the physics and you know,
Yep.
you can do so much. And I guess that's what I always wish I saw more of in that movie was playing with that dream
Yes.
element.
Yeah.
Why do the dreams feel so realistic
You
most of the time?
almost, I think part of what they were doing with that is that it was giving you a little bit of confusion as to whether or not they were dreaming or not. Like,
Yeah,
there was
I
like
could see
this,
that.
Are they really in danger? Are they okay? And then once Freddy Krueger,
In some ways, but then there was always fog. I always felt like that was kind of a
Right,
cue.
yeah, there were
although,
cues. Definitely,
yeah.
there were definitely cues. Later in the movie is when they kind of do that little bit of,
Blending.
different- Yeah. Now, as far as that goes, I almost wished like David Lynch would direct this movie.
Right. Here's a thing I was thinking of. I'm going to bring Josh Larson from Film Spotting, and he had a pretty positive review of Nightmare on Elm Street, but he brought up something in the end of his review that in a way was high praise for Wes Craven, but all it really did was make me just think about what could have been. I'm just going to read this here. As the movie goes on, though, the dream world and the actual one begin to intertwine. When Nancy asks her boyfriend, a baby-faced Johnny Depp, amusingly cast as a jock, to watch over her as she sleeps, he pops up in her ensuing dream as an ineffectual guardian. In these scenes, Nightmare resembles less the slasher silliness of the Friday the 13th films than the narrative inventiveness of Charlie Kaufman. Efforts such as adaptation and being John Malkovich. These movies toy with us by puncturing our rational understanding of reality. Nightmare does it in a more malevolent manner.
Interesting.
And I think that's interesting to bring up those comparisons, but all it did was really make me think, oh, how awesome would a Nightmare on Elm Street, Charlie Kaufman. He's so cool.
And I see what they were doing, what Wes Craven was doing with, the dream world was kept a little bit more realistic because the dream world also enters the real world. So if they were so completely different, then it would be a little less plausible for, say, a geyser of blood to shoot out of Johnny Depp's bed.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, that was one thing that this movie impressed me, is it's got these very impressive visual sequences. Certain things are just really well done.
Yeah, and those are the pieces that I really do love about the movie. There's the Tina pieces in particular where she's thrashing around on the ceiling.
Yes, yep.
I think these are the things that get to me, or the visual sort of creepy elements.
Yeah.
There's also the part where she's in the body bag.
Yes,
in the school.
I think Nancy's dream at school is, for me, the most effective one, where Tina's in the body bag and she's just being dragged by nothing you can see.
Yep.
That very thick trail of blood, and he's taking his time. It was those things that I feel are unusual for the slasher genre. The quiet, the long shot, the lighting where you could see everything happening, and it was just really scary. The unsettling, all of a sudden the hall monitor is Freddy Krueger. Like, granted, that woman didn't act all that well, but still, like, when she turns around and she's bloody and...
Tina?
Where's your pass?
Screw your pass.
Hey, Nancy. No running in the hallway.
Yeah, those are the things that remind me of like The Shining, which another movie that actually does creep me out a lot.
Yes,
and it's all visual creepiness.
Right.
There's not really any jump moments.
There aren't. Well, we could talk about The Shining a lot. There really aren't. It's
been a
one
long
of the
time
things
since I've
that I
seen it,
find
yeah.
super brilliant about it, but it's just like, oh, I don't like what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But then it kind of makes you look at it for a while.
Yeah.
And there were those things, like I said, when he cuts himself open, when Tina is thrashing on the ceiling, completely covered in blood, even the geyser of blood. And I've seen before, but I still loved it when I saw it. The shot of Nancy in the tub when Freddy Krueger's hand just comes out of the water. But I feel like those moments were sort of abandoned in every case for more run-of-the-mill horror. And that may be what it was in 1984, was that no other movie had those moments at all anyway, even though The Shining came out 4 years earlier.
But no one liked The Shining.
Right. The Shining, Stanley Kubrick got nominated for a Razzie in 1980 for worst director. It's pretty funny to look back and see what in the 80s
people thought
the
was terrible.
Razzies were calling terrible. Like The Shining was all over that. Shelley Duvall, worst actress.
Really?
Yeah. It's like, maybe they want to take some of these back.
Wow, it kind of makes you think, are we going to be eating our words with Norbit?
Yeah, with Norbit, with Sandra Bullock in that one Steve movie, whatever that was. You remember that, what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's a masterpiece.
I bet it is.
If The Shining, actually, you're in pretty good company if The Shining's in there.
That's true. Every Razzie nominee can say, well, Stanley Kubrick was also nominated for Razzie.
Right, which may be more than we can say about the Oscars.
That is very true. The Razzies are the only organization to
recognize Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah. So that's why I feel not just indifferent towards the movie, but up and down.
To me, this is a movie that overall feels run-of-the-mill, but it's punctuated with some really great moments.
Yeah.
Because if you think about some of those scenes that are really great, you got to think about what comes directly afterwards. And some of the scenes are just so terrible, like all the jail scenes with Rod. Or just anything with Rod in general.
Rod's awful.
Matter of fact, I had a bad dream last night myself.
I had a hard-on this morning when I woke up, Tina. Had your name written all over it.
There's 4 letters in my name, Rod. How could there be room on your joint for 4 letters?
Hey, up yours with a twirling lawnmower.
Nah, Rod's is the sweetest things.
Oh, he's nuts about you.
And I think that's also part of Wes Craven's thing, and maybe it's because I really am not a huge fan of like Scream, but part of Wes Craven's thing is actually to send up or to be very aware of the teen horror genre and the tropes that are involved in that. And I guess to me, he's so capable of doing legitimately good horror that I just wish he'd stick to that and stop trying to be so, like, I guess in a way meta about it. Like with Scream, the best part of Scream is that original scene with Drew Barrymore. That's a legitimately great slasher. Someone's coming in your home. Through and through, it's an amazing sequence. And that's the setup to the movie. And then the rest of the movie, in my opinion, I know what it's doing. Yeah. It's all a send up to the tropes of teen horror movies, but it's also just not very good. And it doesn't hold my attention for very long. Yeah. Like Wes Craven, it's like, come on, you know how to make a really good horror movie. Just make a good horror movie.
Yeah. And I feel like a little bit, I almost identify with what he's doing there. Because I don't write a lot of fiction, mainly because I talk myself out of any idea I have. But almost every time I start to explore an idea as like possible short story or possible whatever, just for fun, I always start coming up with really trite and hackneyed ideas. And so then I almost always think, oh, well, I could make it a story about somebody writing a story and all they can think of is bad ideas.
Yeah,
and I'm shut up. Stop it. Like, that's terrible. I almost feel like Wes Craven, I don't know anything about him or his psyche, but what it feels like to me is somebody who didn't have enough faith in their great ideas or didn't have enough in their faith in their ability to execute maybe a weaker idea to do it straight. That every time that they had a weaker idea,
they just felt like if I can wink at you,
oh well,
then I'll get away with it.
That was the point. The point was all these movies that have, that really grating jock chauvinist character. Well, you could have written him better. Like Glenn wasn't terrible.
Well,
Glenn was interesting.
He wasn't a stock character,
right?
He had his cheesy moments, but I mean, he was
for being a jock character. He was scared, not like typical scared, not like we should get out of here, man. Right. But like,
and he wasn't always trying to get in the girl's pants,
right? He didn't really trust himself to be the hero, which is not common for the jockish character.
Yeah,
that's interesting in and of itself. So I think he could have gone interesting with Rod too. And maybe he thought he was by making him sort of a victim of the legal system or something. I don't know. I can't quite pinpoint it, but I feel like winking at it is a safety net.
Yeah.
Was sort of what was happening in some ways.
Yeah, and I guess I have an appreciation for some movies that do that. Like, I don't know if you call it maybe just a direct parody, but like Shaun of the Dead is a movie that is definitely winking at you and throwing all the zombie tropes at you, but is legitimately scary in sections, but leans more on that comedy side.
Yeah, legitimately scary, legitimately funny, and legitimately doing something new in horror and comedy, pushing both of them.
Right. And being respectful of all of them.
Right. Yeah. Not saying, look at me doing it better. Why didn't anybody think of this? But I love what everybody did. And here's my new take on it. Like, I feel like
so
there's
I'm not
not
saying,
that level of smartness or intentionality.
But I guess what's so frustrating is that you do see these moments of brilliance in Wes Craven.
Or just surprise you in a way that you didn't think. The gooey stairs.
Yeah.
Like when she just sinks into the stairs.
Yeah.
It's not the scariest thing, but it's certainly like, whoa, yeah, okay, she's in trouble.
Right. Or like when Nancy's sleeping in the bed and he's coming through the wall.
Yeah.
And it's not like you can't figure out, like, okay, that's obviously some kind of fabric or something. Like, who cares? It's just a really cool looking effect. The idea of some monster just seeping through a wooden wall like that.
Yeah. For one thing, if we can just quickly, I can point out another, maybe it was a wink, but the classic tripwire check when she's booby trapping the house and like, Bling.
Now,
Test the tension of the tripwire.
a little Kevin McAllister
A
going
little
on
bit,
there.
yeah.
A little
That's
Home
what
Alone.
I said.
Yeah.
I said this is a really zany scene. Like it's supposed
With
to
the
be
sledgehammer
Yeah,
that
and then
like,
it's like whoa, 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 and trips over the stairs. Yeah, I was like, is this supposed to be funny? Because
Like
I don't
slapstick
think
funny?
so.
yeah.
I don't think so. But
Now,
it's
is it
definitely
funny
not
as we filter it through at being someone who grew up with Home Alone?
I don't know. It could
Because
be
I can't imagine
That's
anybody
another
from our
thing.
generation watching that and not thinking immediately of Home
Home
Alone.
Alone. Oh, of course I did.
I watched it with my wife, and she's like, "Is this Home Alone?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "This was a long time
Yeah,
before Home
well,
Alone." So if anything,
well,
John Hughes was.
It was
you
only
know-
6 years. But
Oh yeah.
you're right. And I also can't say how I would have seen this movie without 30 years of Freddy Krueger being almost like the lovable slasher villain.
Yeah.
Quippy and, a little neutered. Although if he's listening, I'm probably going to get killed in my dreams tonight.
Don't fall asleep.
I won't. Okay, so I know exactly what he looks like. So there's no real terror to that.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen him on like Entertainment Weekly covers.
Yeah. We've seen wax figures of the guy.
Yeah.
I think that does inform the way we watch it because I actually,
Oh, it has to.
as I'm watching it, I'm actually thinking to myself, Krueger might just be the lamest part of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because the parts that actually got to me were the parts that were unexpected, like the more surreal sort of things that just kind of creep you out. But that's probably only because those aren't the parts that get
Yeah.
referenced later on in
Right.
pop culture. And so Freddy Krueger is just such a very safe
Yeah.
horror villain at this
he's-
point,
I mean, I think almost a little bit of like Ice Cube and Ice-T.
Okay.
You try to tell a kid today, like, oh, dude, Ice Cube shook it up. White America did not know what to do with him. And it was like, the guy from Are We There Yet?
Right. The guy in the family film section.
Yeah. Ice-T, like, people wanted to arrest him based on words he wrote. From Law and Order? Yeah, that guy. The Ice-T from Law and Order. It's along those lines. It's a terrible analogy.
I know what you mean, though.
Because Ice Cube and Ice-T were really necessary. A voice of people who were not given a voice.
Yes.
But the idea that he was ever the stuff of nightmares is what's sort of like,
Hard to understand.
Yeah.
I wish we could talk to someone who actually had seen the
Yeah.
movie in 1984, maybe even as a teenager,
Right.
and try to get into that space. I mean, I'm trying to think of what was a horror movie that we grew up with that everyone talked about.
Well, Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, and I can't imagine.
Scream. I have not seen the Blair Witch Project.
I have.
Probably should.
And I didn't think it was scary at the time, but I think what was novel about it was that
the
that
found
whole found
footage.
footage thing, and that's so cliched almost now.
But that's the true story thing.
I know.
That's what you have to do. You just have to say your movie's based on a true story.
So if they said based on a true story at the beginning,
I probably wouldn't.
not.
No, I'd be
No.
like, Freddy Krueger. What part of this is true?
I think one of the cheapest things about this movie is there's kind of two endings to the movie.
Oh, yeah. I hated that.
I hated it too. I thought it sort of like just was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
Because
I don't even care enough to make sense of what you just did.
so basically the only thing you got to do if you see Freddy Krueger in your dreams, turns out just turn your back on the dude.
Right. And he disappears.
And he disappears
in like,
like
a
a-
Star Trek teleportation effect. They teleport. Somebody's going to get mad at me for that. Beaming up.
But Freddy Krueger does that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a
He does it
sparkly.
Yeah.
It's a sparkly
That came out of nowhere.
just disappearing.
It all of a sudden had this like sci-fi look to it.
Right.
And I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah, totally.
And it would have even been visually better if he had maybe just dissolved into like a fog or like
Right.
It's like this really cheesy, staticky kind of thing.
But,
And
that doesn't even make sense to
No,
the
I
rest of the
know.
movie
It
because
doesn't.
Johnny Depp didn't even see him when he died in his dream.
true.
He just opened up the bed and died.
I guess maybe does it have to be sort of like a conscious decision that you were going to turn your back on this person?
I don't
And
know
Johnny
how-
Depp still had
maybe.
his character Glenn still had a feeling that Freddy Krueger was lurking.
I don't know. But then
It just seems cheap.
No, it's totally
That's
cheap.
in the writing. I mean, there's nothing else you can blame other than come up with something better.
He
Come
had
up
no
with,
more ideas for scares. Like
yeah.
Okay. I think that's probably enough.
You do get the sense this guy is pretty much invincible because she kind of burns him in the house even.
Right.
So you're wondering what could possibly kill this person.
Self-confidence.
Turns out, it's just
I don't need
got
you.
really
Wait,
low
you need
self-esteem.
him? Wait. And
But
then
there's
what?
maybe,
And then what? And then what? Like,
I know.
what is that ending?
The ending was supposed to, I thought was kind of cool. Like, okay, so are we still in a dream? Is there still danger lurking? But they showed him disappearing. So,
Well,
did he not disappear?
so they show him disappearing when she turns his back on him. That's what you're talking about. And then the next day is this foggy, there's your clue,
Right. So you're supposed, I
very
think,
bright day.
yeah.
The mom is totally fine. I don't want to drink again. Again, another effective sequence where the car starts rolling windows up and closing the roof on its own. When you're like, "Whew, this is spooky." A little much for the cover on the convertible to be red and green. We get it. So Freddy is the car.
I think so.
But
I think
then
that,
he's inside the house to grab the mother and pull her through the tiny window. Is he everywhere? Like, is that what the ending is?
Is that maybe what the
It's
staticky
all a
thing
dream.
was
She
it,
didn't die, or she
Yeah.
didn't actually beat him. She died, and now she's stuck in this dream. I have no idea, and I haven't obviously seen a sequel to know what they do.
Well, I
with
think in
that.
the sequel, because he had low self-esteem, he went to counseling,
Sure.
learned how to affirm himself.
I
and
mean,
you
yeah.
could no longer turn your back on him because he had the confidence he needed to kill you.
Well, even if you turned your back on him, he knew who he was, and he did not put his value in that. And it's Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's breakthrough.
Right.
I genuinely don't know, and there wasn't enough in the movie to make me think like, oh man, what was that? What was that ending? What was he doing? It was just like, I don't know what you're doing. I am sick of this.
I kind of liked it. I feel like it keeps you.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
All it is.
It keeps you with the sense that not all is safe.
Yeah, but
And it does play with that dream thing, which, we've seen. I mean, even if you talk about like Inception, like we've seen this, this idea of like, are we still dreaming,
yeah,
And it does do the callback to the girls with the jump ropes and the
Yes,
children
it
singing.
does.
So
It does.
it brings that back around, even though I don't really know what that means or
yeah,
it symbolizes.
that was very clear to them. It reminds me of that old jump rope song. Like, oh, I'm not sure you're gonna have to do a refresher. Run that by me
Recap.
again. Yeah, explain that to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
So scary.
Yeah, there was something in the song. There was nothing about the dream that made me think of a jump rope song.
But don't you think that comes with a lot of these horror movies where the more
Well,
you think
sure.
about it, you're bound. I mean,
Sure.
take even your best horror movies, and the more you think about it, you're going to be like, yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't want to linger on that too
No.
much, but I do think that for this
for the
particular movie, I wasn't able to overlook it by the end, and I think it really did come down to that cheap ending where she
Yeah.
just turns her back
For
on
the
him.
whole
'Cause
movie
after that,
to
I was,
hinge,
yeah.
the whole movie to culminate in, I don't know, he disappears or something. And then the girls jump rope, and then we've got this killer song by my cousin. My nephew wrote a song for the movie.
that song.
It's terrible. Yeah, I think for me, my dislike for the movie, which probably sounds like I like it less than 3 stars, but up until the ending, I do like it. It's funny for me to look in my notes. I go from a couple questions in the beginning as I'm trying to figure it out, then like, oh, this is a good makeup effects, effective gross out imagery. Some things aren't working so well. Oh, but this is pretty good. This is good. Oh, I like the blood guys or all this stuff. And then my notes turn to not quite sure the logic of this. Kind of surprised about this. A little zany. And then my last note is, I'm not sure I understand it at all. The movie just sort of like
Fizzles.
ran out of ideas.
It fizzles, which is probably fine for cementing Freddy Krueger. Like it got its job done.
Yeah.
and they could kind of make it into a cash cow.
Right.
But you're looking at the movie itself, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
By the end, it just kind of
Yeah.
goes into nothing,
And
really.
maybe their plan was like, all right, we're just going to hit them hard and then we're going to get out before they can think about it.
I feel like, because this is my second time seeing it, the second time around, I started to lose interest maybe even a little bit earlier.
I bet.
And what was hard was the concept is great, but the way they battle that concept for so long is just trying really hard not to fall asleep.
Right.
So if you're not into this movie, it's very hard not to watch them falling asleep and be like, man, I'm tired too.
I don't think we're going to figure anything out. There's a little too much distance between our sensibilities and those of teenagers in 1984 for, I think, us to do sort of like a cultural zeitgeist analysis. I think the most we can say is that this is a talented director who maybe wasn't quite confident enough in his own ideas for a while, or was too confident in his bad ideas. I don't know. We'll never know.
I mean, there's certainly plenty of people who love this movie.
And I honestly,
And
I'm
I
fine
think-
with that.
And I think it's, exactly. It doesn't rub me the wrong way
I
at
get
all.
it
And
to a point.
yeah.
And I think there's enough for you to say, like, I don't know, those visuals just really carry me, and I like the dream world.
Well, let me put it this way. I think October rolls around, and there's just a part of me that kind of wants to sometimes watch a movie like this. It's not great.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You
I
know,
get you.
it's got its problems.
Uh-huh.
You even know you're going to be let down at the end. But
Yeah.
hey, it's October. It's Halloween. This
Yeah.
is what you put
and
on.
you know what? If I don't make it to the end, that's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll throw it on.
Yeah.
If something better comes up.
This is like a perfect movie to have on, like if you have to be at home during trick or treating.
Sure.
Because you got to get up, you got to get the candy out. You don't know
Yeah.
when you're going to get interrupted. But hey, it's just the right movie to have on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if I were younger, a couple years ago, I probably would have been like, no, there's no room in the world for a movie like this. I'm fine.
But what I'm curious about is we know that they made, at least 7 of these movies afterwards, plus the remake.
Mm-hmm.
So if we know we just can turn our back on the dude, and
I have no idea.
So if I don't really care to watch any other ones,
Because apparently that didn't work.
I guess
It did, but it didn't. Like,
So-
it was a trick.
for any of our listeners out there who maybe have seen these sequels, if you could just fill us in about how
Don't
they
make
work.
us watch them.
Like, just how do they work? I'm kind of just confused. If we were confused enough by the logic at the end of this movie, how does the logic continue
Yeah.
into the next few
I
movies?
almost want to watch the second one, or at least start it.
Maybe just the first few minutes to get the idea.
Yeah.
Something has to
See what
happen
they
to
do.
make it
I
work.
guess I could read about it. I don't know. I really don't want to watch another one, though. Another Freddy Krueger movie.
No, I'm good.
Yeah. So I can't see our ratings changing.
No. I think we kind of just affirmed for each other what we were kind of both thinking. It's
Yeah,
fine.
I
The
guess I
movie's
was-
fine.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know if you were going to have some take on it and be like, I think the movie really gets at the human need. No.
I will say, if you're looking for that, I think Josh Larson's review is actually pretty good.
Okay.
He gives it 4 stars, and he does get
Out
into
of 4?
Yeah, I think. Does
Really?
he do a 4 or 5? I think
have
he does
no
a
idea.
4-star rating. I'm not sure, but it's high praise.
All right, I'll check that out. Maybe we'll put that on the old website.
So, best buds.
Oh, yeah. You and me, not me in the movie.
All right, so let's talk about our next episode of Can We Still Be Friends?
Let's
episode
do.
what number?
33.
Are we on?
It's gonna be
33.
33.
Episode 33.
33.
Ryan, are you excited for Spectre?
Yes, I am. I am excited.
The new
The
James Bond.
movie. Sam Mendes again directing.
Yeah. This is Daniel Craig's last?
He said it's his last. Yeah,
Okay.
he said you couldn't. Yeah, I believe he said he'd rather die than do another James
I heard
Bond
that too.
movie.
Yeah.
Kind of takes the magic out of it a little bit.
If
I
it's
really
that
wanna know-
terrible to be James
Right.
Bond, what hope do any of us
Yeah.
have, really?
I really want to know that James Bond is in it to win it.
Right.
You know?
We were both huge fans of Skyfall,
Oh, absolutely.
the last James Bond movie.
Terrific.
Crazy thing is,
Yeah. Crazy thing.
so you had never seen Nightmare on Elm Street. Turns out I've never seen a single Sean Connery James Bond film.
That's crazy. He made several.
I know.
They've been around.
And he's kind
Not-
of like-
not difficult to get your hands on.
I know. And I'm not even,
That's crazy to me.
I don't even have a reason. Because
No?
I like James Bond,
Yeah.
the ones I've seen.
Yeah.
And Sean Connery is kind of like the James Bond,
Well,
the
that's
iconic.
debatable. But yeah, No, I mean for your money. Yeah, nobody's.
Well, let me put it this way.
Nobody's going to call you a lunatic if you say Sean Connery's probably my favorite James Bond. I think you could probably make the case that Sean Connery made James Bond too. You know,
possibly.
He wasn't a likable James Bond.
I can't make that case. I haven't seen him.
You can't at all make that case.
I'd like to make that case.
I,
though,
on
in
the
our next
other
episode.
hand, on the other hand, just kind of went down the list. I think there are 2 James Bond movies I haven't seen. They are, one is a Timothy Dalton, and one is a Pierce Brosnan.
Is it the one with Halle Berry?
Correct. And the other James Bond movies, I have almost certainly seen more than once.
Okay.
I watched a lot of James Bond as a kid. So the one that is pretty commonly pointed to as one of the best early James Bond movies, maybe one of the best James Bond movies ever. Yeah, people will say it's one of the best James Bond movies
I
ever.
always see it on the list of movies you have to see before you die.
Yeah.
And if they have to choose one
If
James
you have
Bond,
to watch James Bond,
it is
here's Goldfinger.
Goldfinger. Okay.
Nate has never seen it. It's, let me think, the second or third Bond movie. I think it's the third Bond movie that they made.
We'll know that by next
We
episode
will.
for sure.
But in any case, it's a classic. If you haven't seen Goldfinger, you will watch it and say, I feel like I've seen this movie because it is visually referenced everywhere, not the least of which in Austin Powers.
Which is a movie I saw so many times.
Right.
So I feel like,
You will-
did I really need to see Goldfinger?
And I'm worried, I got to tell you, I'm worried that seeing it in the Austin Powers context is going to make it a little funny to you.
Okay.
I want you to fight that urge.
I will take that into account
Thank you.
when I see it.
Watch it with us because it's a great movie. It really, I guess I'm tipping my hand.
And if you haven't seen the movie, you don't have to be ashamed because I'm with you.
Sure.
I'm excited to see it, and I think it'll help ramp me up even more for Spectre. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm sure it will. If you've seen it at least once, let us know what you think about Goldfinger, about James Bond. Who's the best Bond? Is Blonde Bond okay? What about the idea of Idris Elba being Bond? I'm kind of excited by that prospect.
Yeah.
But also talk about Nightmare on Elm Street to us. Email us. Our email is feedback@canwestillbefriends.net.
You can always hit us up on our website, canwestillbefriends.net.
Facebook, just search Can We Still Be Friends? Probably pop up somehow. Maybe 2 or 3 down the list, but we're there.
It'll be the last few people you blocked because you'll be saying, "Can we still be friends?"
Yes.
And then it'll be
Right.
our podcast.
Yeah, skip that group of people who come election time, you're like, I don't want to see what you have to say. You've been put in the group, Can We Still Be Friends? Not that, it's a podcast. Like us on Facebook. Also, Twitter. Our handle is @CWSBF.
I think we can figure out what that means.
Yeah, it's well, we'll figure that out by next episode too, what that acronym means. But find us on Twitter, or just follow us on Twitter. We always post our new episodes there, and some questions and some articles that are pertaining to what we are going to be looking at and discussing.
You can also give us a call and leave us a friendly and cheerful voicemail.
Oh,
We'd
it
love
doesn't
to-
have to be friendly. And
It doesn't have to be.
No.
Sorry, that's just a suggestion. A suggested
If
tenor
we're
of
honest,
voice.
that's what we would like to hear.
And if you're going to do that, the number you're going to need to call is 847-306-9532. We would love to hear from you. And if you would like to show your support in any way whatsoever, just give us a decent rating on iTunes. We always appreciate that. Or, just tell your friends.
That being said, our desire for new listeners does not change our love for our current listeners.
Absolutely not.
So, as always, thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to our next discussion of Goldfinger.
Yes, thank you.